The three signs that are going to have an absolutely wild week are Gemini, Capricorn, and Gemini. Hello and welcome. This is the Astrology of the Week Ahead podcast. I'm your host, your astro bestie. And in this episode, we're talking about the astrology of the one and only week, July 7th. She is that girl. You thought that 2025 has been wild? No. We don't know anything yet. We have saved the best for halfway through the year, as Gemini would have it. Okay, look. On Monday, one of the biggest things to happen in decades and decades and decades, astrologically speaking, is the fact that Uranus is coming back into Gemini. This transit is related to what we could say is a new world order. Because the last time this transit happened was between 1941 and about 1948. And then a couple times before that, let's say in 1861, Uranus was also in Gemini. And that just so happened to be the same time as the U.S. Civil War. And then another time before that was 1774 to 1772, which was the American Revolution. So all I'm saying is that there have been times, again, especially most recently, where Uranus being in Gemini has signified something massive, not just for the United States, because boy, am I sick of talking about the United States, but for the world at large. Again, it brings about, or it could bring about, or it could be a sign of something like a new world order. This is the deal with Gemini. It is what we call a humane sign. If you think of the symbol for Gemini, it's the two twins. Maybe they're going different ways. Maybe they're arguing with each other. One is introverted, one is extroverted, one wants to talk a lot, one never says anything. Happy face, sad face. You know the deal. It's the both and what's in between the binary makes space for a third place. It is the queerest sign of all, perhaps. So Uranus moving into Gemini, a sign that has to do with people and people en masse, because there's like multiples, it's not just one person, it's two people in the sign, then we know that there's a change because it's Uranus. Uranus deals with change and upheavals and yes, revolutions and rebellions and all of that. There's something to do with a new way in which we are doing Gemini, doing people, coming together as a collective, but also communications. Now, Pluto is already in Aquarius. So the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was the American Revolution, was the French Revolution, was the Haitian Revolution. Again, a humane sign. Aquarius is the water bearer, so it depicts a person. So when a major planet, like an outer planet, a planet that takes a long time to move through a sign, aka Pluto and Uranus and Neptune, change signs, which they all have just recently, just like within the last couple months, when they all change signs and two of them are in signs that are specifically about people, and one is about big transformations, Pluto, and the other one is about major changes and out of the blue, unforeseen, scramble everything up and reconfigure it totally, like 2.0ing a situation, when two of them are in air signs that deal with and are symbolized by actual humans, we know that we are in the midst of major change, collectively speaking. We also could say that both the sign Aquarius and the planet Uranus have something to do with technology and experimentation. I don't relate Uranus as the ruler of Aquarius. I don't do that. I don't think of the outer planets as rulers of signs. But we can say that there's natural correlations between them for sure. And so because Pluto was in Aquarius when the last industrial revolution happened, and it's now back in Aquarius, we know that an industrial revolution is happening. Hello, AI. And because Uranus is moving into a Mercury-ruled sign, which is the planet of communication, and it's about innovation and science and experiments and trying new things, we know that there's some major changes in store for us in regards to technology and how we use it and how it impacts us. So cue all of the, stories and all of the novels and all of the movies that have warned us about the time that we're in. But also, let's cue our imaginations for a different outcome, for a different story, for a different way of doing us together, because that's really what these time periods are about. I just want to say that in 1861, when we were going through the United States Civil War, 1861 to 1865, that was also a time that Neptune was in Aries. That was the last time Neptune was in Aries, and Neptune is again in Aries. It was there in 1861. It's there again now. Uranus was in Gemini then. It is again now. So, we can just be like, oh, look, same. And really all we need to do is a vibe check. Can we do a vibe check? Does it have the vibes of a little civil unrest right now? I don't know. I don't know what it's like on July 7th where you are, but I'm in June when I'm recording this, and it is a lot of civil unrest, and rightly so. And that is also, what we're being forced to do. All of it is being staged. Anyways, I won't get into too many of the details because, again, I'm in the past, you're in the future. I don't really know what's happening then, now, here, where you are. But I can say that it is a time where the world is being reconfigured. It's going to be reconfigured through technology. Obviously, you don't need an astrologer to tell you that. That's happening, but it's going to be ramped up now. Tech is going to get so weird and so out there and so rapidly evolved. I think there's going to be like major changes with this astrology. And we know that we're moving into a time that is particularly poignant for the United States. And I don't know if you notice anything going on in the United States that feels particularly poignant, not just for the people here, but for also countries around the world. And again, the world order. This is the deal. Uranus was just in Taurus. It just spent like 7 years in Taurus, which is about the material realm. It's about stuff. And we had money go from money, not totally, but we had Bitcoin. We had a different currency come about, which felt very Uranus in Taurus, because it's like, wait, we had actual money, and now we have like the concept of cryptocurrency. And now it's going to move into Gemini, which is a sign ruled by Mercury, which is the merchant, which is, counts everything up. So it does feel like it's going to be a different kind of financial development, but it definitely feels like we're counting things in a very different way. And like I said, there's just this real emphasis on our social cohesion, or the ways in which we gather, and collectively how everything's impacting us. And it seems like a time where we're going to go through a lot of collective changes. We're going to go through a period of 7 years of big upheaval and change. And we know that. This is not I'm not telling you something you don't know. I'm just telling you the signs are saying, yep, that's where we are. Also, people that have this signature, people that have Uranus and Gemini, people that are like close to 84 in their 80s, they're also going to have moments if they're people in power, Geminis themselves, obviously. So that's the thing that we're moving into. Uranus is going to be here for a couple of months, and then it'll go back into Taurus and finish something up later in the year, and then come back in 2026. So like all of these big planetary ingresses that are happening this year, from March to July to now, we had Neptune change signs, Saturn change signs, Jupiter change signs, and then Uranus change signs. That's a big deal. Signals a year of absolute departure from what we know as reality. Then the planets are all going to station retrograde, and they're all going to go back into their previous signs in the later part of this year. We're going to go back into an older, familiar, known kind of reality for a hot second. And then we're going to go into 2026, and we're going to go back into this new thing. All the planets are going to move back into their new signs. So this is the introduction. We're still in the midst of a lot of introductions. It's like we've entered into a new movie, and we're being introduced to all of these new characters. And we're like, wait a minute. Do you guys like each other? Do you get along? Are you guys going to hook up later? Like, what is actually going on? We don't know yet. We're just being introduced to the new characters. And like a substitute teacher, we're like, I don't like you. I don't know you. I don't know her. Like, where is my old teacher? What is going on? Why did everyone throw a wrench in the works? It's these new faces, these new things. But we know that a lot of countries the world over will be going through shifts. We're going through shifts about like what our populations do, what we believe in, what we rally for, how we rally for the things we believe in, all of that. So fun times ahead. There is no rest for any of us. This is the time we agreed to be in though, right? We all came. We all are here. This is what we're doing. So we have to just accept the fact that we were born for this. And this is what is the meaning of our life. The meaning of our life is being here with each other in this moment and figuring it out beat by beat. We can't know how it's all going to unfold. We can't get swept up in any kind of panic or worry about it. We can just be like, oh, okay, we're back in this rhythm of time. We're back here in this cycle. We can do it differently this time. We don't have to have a whole bunch of devastation. We don't have to have a whole bunch of loss. I don't think. We don't. We really don't. There's people that are choosing that, but we can choose a different thing. Okay. Also on Monday, Venus, planet of connection and social cohesion and beauty and art and pleasure and play, it makes a trine with Pluto. Venus is in Gemini, so it's signaling what Uranus is, gonna do eventually. So again, there's this connection between the signs that have to do with people, the collective of people, the group of people, the two people talking, the whole group of people doing the thing. Gemini and Aquarius are home to some big changes representing people, us, how we're doing life together, how we come together, and what we understand about our collective power, because that's really Pluto and Aquarius for sure. And then collective innovations and collective shifts that we're going through. That's the Uranus and Gemini of it all. And then Thursday, the full moon in Capricorn arrives. And I think it's going to be a steadying influence. There's a way in which a full moon in Capricorn's like, look, what can we do practically here and now? A lot of stuff happening in air signs is like a lot of things in flux, especially when something big happens in Gemini. It's a mixing of things. It's a mixing of colors. It's a mixing of sounds. It's a mix. It's not good or bad. It's just a whole mishmash of everything. So I feel like having a full moon the week of a major planetary shift is like, okay, that's an exaggeration maybe we didn't have to have. I don't know. Is that kind of overboard? Maybe. But because it's in Capricorn, I do feel like there's something grounding and practical about Capricorn that can help us to sort through what's happening right now. And because it is a full moon in Capricorn, it's a really good time to remember to supply ourselves with what we need. Why? Because the moon doesn't do so well in Capricorn, and the moon is about our needs and our bodies. And so it's a really good time to be like, how can I practically, in a very realistic way, meet my needs? Do I need to take my vitamins? Have I napped? Have I checked in with a friend? Have I eaten today? Like super simple, very practical. Have I gotten some sunlight? Have I gotten some exercise? Maybe do a little breathing. Like anything that helps us feel like we're connected to our body and we're supplying ourselves and we're taking responsibility for our own health and well-being is a good thing to do. Also, to-do lists, get really practical, get really thorough, be in the moment. Don't get too swept up in like what are we going to do about the major things that we're in as a collective? We don't know. We got to show up. We got to show up in the moment and be like, my purpose right now is to just show up. I got to show up for who's in front of me. I got to show up for the responsibilities that I've said yes to. And that's all I can do. And then I got to show up for my responsibility to myself. And that's the wisdom of a full moon in Capricorn. The ruler of this full moon is Saturn. And Saturn stations retrograde on Saturday. Now, Neptune has also just stationed retrograde. They're both in Aries. So this is pulling focus on the brazen emphasis of harsh military force that Saturn in Aries can tend to bring about. And so there's maybe a retreat of some of that because it is retrograding. By September 1st, Saturn is going to go back into Pisces, and I think that some things are going to ease up and kind of like let up. There are eclipses in September, so I'm not saying like totally, but in terms of the harshness and in terms of the blatant cruelty that happens. I don't know. I can't promise that it won't be like that in September, but when Saturn goes back into Pisces, which it's preparing to do as of Saturday because it's starting to retrograde, it does feel like we have a moment where something else can flow, like some kindness, like some compassion, or there might be a little bit more of an opening. So Saturn stationing retrograde and ruling this full moon does feel like it's a really good time to review our commitments. It's a really good time to review how we can show up in the world as grown-ass adults. It's a really good time to review where we've lost our patience, how we can cultivate more of it, and thinking about the part of our chart that contains Aries and just taking note of like, okay, I have been building there, I have been working really hard there. Is it working? Do I like the results? Do I want to keep going? And we're going to set something down soon. In September, we're going to set something down and then we're going to pick it up again in the new year. So you might also be like reviewing something in your life. This is a moment to review the structure, the ways in which you're going about something, and all of the ways in which something is or isn't working. Okay, now I want to go into a question that we got from the audience, which is, how do you interpret the degrees of your chart? Phenomenal question. I love this question. I love to talk about the degrees. The degrees are so important. So the degrees of your rising sign, the degrees of a planet in your chart, the degrees of anything that is an object or point that we, have named in the chart. Is so important what exact degree they fall in the zodiac, in the sign that they're in. There's a big difference between a planet at 2 degrees of a sign and 26 degrees of a sign. And this is why. A of all, there's a technique or there's a way of looking at each 10 degrees of the zodiac. It's called the decans, and it is an ancient Egyptian kind of technique to understand how the planets are different given if they fall between 0 and 10, 10 and 20, or 20 and 30 degrees of that sign. And each 10-degree section of each sign means something very specific. So someone born in the first 10 days of Aries is going to be very different than somebody born in the last 10 days of Aries, given this kind of paradigm or this way of seeing the sky. That's one way to think of it and to understand why the degrees are important. We can look at what decan or like what aspect of that sign the planet is falling in. Then there is something called the bounds, and there's different systems within this, but it's another technique. It is another technique that we could say that one of them is Egyptian as well, like ancient Egyptian astrology. And that tells us that certain degrees of each sign are ruled by a specific planet. And if you have a planet in the bounds that it's ruled by, it's like extra important or extra strong or extra significant. So there's that too. And then there's a third thing, which is exaltation degrees. So there are certain degrees of certain signs for certain planets that are said to be the exaltation degree. So Jupiter has an exaltation degree of Cancer, the moon has an exaltation degree of Taurus, and so on. And so if you have a planet at that degree, that's really important too, because that's like a super special signature. And then you want to think of like knowing the exact degree of a planet, because then you can layer on fixed stars. So the planets move, right? They're like moving bodies in the sky, but they're moving against stars that don't really move. They move like very slowly. Anyways, there's a precession, but it's like it's against this fixed backdrop or landscape. And if you have a planet that is within, a certain amount of degrees from a fixed star, that's also really important. And then just think of it in terms of your own chart. If I have the moon, a really fast moving planet at 16 degrees of Libra, and you have Venus at 16 degrees of Libra, that is like an amazing connection between us by very degree. And then say I have the sun at 6 degrees of Cancer, and I have Mars at 6 degrees of Aries. That is an exact square between my sun and my Mars. That's harsh. That's hard. If I have the sun at 20 degrees of Cancer and Mars at 2 degrees of Aries, it's still in a square, but it's not nearly as harsh. It's not nearly as intense. I'm not nearly as like on edge because of that square from Mars. I'm not nearly as fueled either. I'm not nearly as energized by it either. It's there, but it's looser. Like when someone has you imagine someone having you pinned up against a wall, or someone's in the room that you don't really like. It's a very different vibe. And so when we know the precise degrees of planets, we can see when a planet seems to be what, ancient or traditional astrologers would call harming another planet. We want to know if that harm is really close by or if there's some breathing room. It's not good, but it's past the really intense point, or it's not going to get to a really intense point. Or if something's really great, if there's a pot of gold, we want to know if it's across the room or if it's in my pockets. If I've got a Venus-Jupiter trine within a degree, that's a lot better than a Venus-Jupiter trine within 15 degrees. So I want to know how close things are to connecting. So there's different ways of looking at this. It's each degree of the zodiac, each degree of the sign that we're talking about means something if you're looking at it through the lens of these different ways to see the planets in the sky from a viewpoint of ancient astrology. There's also a modern thing called the Sabian symbols, which is somebody channeled a sentence for each and every degree of the zodiac. I don't do that, but people have interesting things about it. So again, that's about every single point that someone has channeled. I think this is in the 70s or something. Maybe it was earlier than that. I don't know. Again, I don't work with it, but you can look up Sabian symbols and see if any of them resonate for you, the ones that you have. But so there's rulers of each. In the traditional system, there's ways of seeing each 10 degree, each decan of each sign. And then there's ways of seeing what planet rules what degrees of what sign, and if that's good or bad for the planet that we're talking about. And then they're seeing how close things are, right? And it's also really important to know the degrees of something, because when something like Pluto that takes forever to move through a sign is within 10 degrees of my ascendant, it's very different than if it's within half a degree of my ascendant. Then I'm going to really feel it. So I need to know the degrees to know precisely what is occurring in my chart. All right, I hope that was helpful. Let me know any further questions you have about that and anything else that you want me to answer. All right, y'all, come back next week and we'll talk about the next Mercury retrograde. I know, it's real, it's true. Uranus is in Mercury's sign. Mercury is about to station retrograde, and we'll talk about what this next wild ride of confusion and missed appointments is going to be about. I think it'll be about a lot. All right, I'll see you back here then. Bye for now.